which gives their backgrounds and who they are. They really don't need introductions. But about 2 months ago, Rita Sri from the Ananta Center and I were having a conversation. And she just threw out an idea and said, why don't we all get together and invite some people to talk to a larger group? And I said, yeah, what do you have in mind? And she said, I want you to moderate the session. I don't know what I have in mind, but I want you to moderate the session. And the first thing she said to me is that I'm thinking that there should be 4 women on the panel. I said, I'm in. So that was it. I was sold right from there on in. And then we sat down and said, there is such wonderful work happening across the country. And there are women, men, youngsters that are just doing brilliant work. So we actually honed down and said, why don't we keep this an all-women panel? And why don't we try and invite women who have been bold, who are change makers, who are doing something different, who are actually challenging the status quo. And that's when Rita Sri pulled together this great group. I personally was very excited about being part of this panel, and I want to share a small story because somewhere deep in my heart, of course, I am a feminist, and I have been touched by the life of my grandmother, my dadi, who I used to lovingly call Ammi. They lived in Pakistan, growing up in Lailpur, which is now Faisalabad district. And Ammi was a bold woman because she got married at the age of 16 to my grandfather. And my grandfather was a business person, and she wanted to work, and she wanted to study. And back then, let alone work, they didn't want you to study beyond class 8 or class 10, certainly not after marriage. So she got married very young, but she wanted to pursue her education and she wanted to become a doctor. And her parents said, that's absolutely sacrilegious, there's no way you can do that. My grandfather, of course, was very upset about knowing that, but she pursued her education. And I remember her telling me these stories when I was growing up. Of course, she passed away 10 years ago. But the stories I lived with, where she said, partition के time पे मेरे को लाहौर से अमृतसर जाना पड़ता था और मैं टांगे में जाती थी वहाँ पे सब्जियाँ बेचने वाला आता था हर रोज़ तो मैं उसको कहती थी कि मैं टांगे में छिपके बोरी में छिपके अमृतसर जाऊँगी पढ़ने के लिए because her resident doctor was in Amritsar and she was in Lahore and it was a tough time. I mean, basically she could have lost her life doing this, but she went and pursued it and she did it and she went on to become a neurologist. Not only that, she went on to become one of the first heads of neurology at the All India Institute of Medical Sciences. And I think for me, that's the story I live with. I get goosebumps even today. It's not only about her life. It's about what she was able to do as a result of that success and that struggle and that fight. I had 9 buas, cousin buas, who grew up with my single father and single bua in Amritsar. And of those 9 buas, 5 of them are doctors today. Unfortunately, all in the US. But they became doctors because they saw their surrogate mother fight and do something which she wanted to, pursued a passion. And I think that's really the power of being bold. So I was very keen not only to come and share this story, but I think we sometimes undermine the influence and role that we play in society. And unknowingly, I'm sure all of you do not realize how many people you're impacting. How many people either sitting here or someday who will hear your story or Google you or watch your movies will know that we can make a difference. So with that, I'd like to welcome this wonderful panel. I'll quickly introduce the 4 panelists. Meera BORWANKAR is the Director General of Police at the Bureau of Police Research and Development. SAIREE CHAHAL is the CEO, founder of Sheroes, which is an online career destination portal for women. BHAIRAVI JANI is the Chairperson and founder of the India Entrepreneurship Foundation and also an Executive Director of the SCA Group, a 4th generation entrepreneur. And GUNJAN is partner at Shardul, Amarchand Mangaldas. She's has extensive experience in the law sector. So welcome to all 4 of you. What I would like to do is maybe start with, and I will spend maybe 45 minutes to an hour just having a conversation with them, and then I'll open it up. So if you can just hold your questions, jot them down for later, we'll open it up and hopefully allow you to have a conversation with them as well. Let me start with Meera. Meera, you grew up in a small rural village in Punjab. Um, your father was a border security force officer. You're an IPS officer from the batch of 1981. You've been part of the anti-terrorism squad, I believe, in Maharashtra. And now you are Director General of Police. I mean, that is just fantastic. We'd love to hear your journey. I've given just a little sort of blurb of what you have achieved, but there is so much more. And if in 2 minutes, I can ask you to summarize your journey thus far, I'd love to hear that.
Thank you. My journey has been basically from a student to Indian Police Service, from a small town, it's not a village, called Fazilka, to Maharashtra, from Punjab to Maharashtra. And back then, 81 was inspired by Mrs. Bedi having joined police. So I was one of those who thought, if she can do it, so can I. So did my professors, lecturers in the college. They felt I could aspire. I joined. And I have done various postings. I would like to flag that in Maharashtra, they would not give a woman IPS officer independent district as police chief. That's at one stage in my life where I thought that we are accepted in 80s, but when it comes to giving a chief of a district called senior superintendent, or in Maharashtra it's only superintendent of police, they had their reservations. So having joined IPS also, I had to fight for that and to prove that we can run independent districts. I was Commissioner of Police Pune for 2 years, but then that's at the fag end of my career and I didn't have anything to prove. I have succeeded, or I feel I have done well in the department because I have always taken juniors, seniors, everyone along. So my personal belief is that leadership is gender neutral. If you are a good team player, you can achieve what you want to achieve. I won't say that I have achieved everything that I aspired for you, but broadly I would say having an open mind, open thinking, being a team player has helped me to reach the position where I am today. Thank you.
Thank you, Meera. I'm just going to go down the stage. BHAIRAVI, you're a 4th generation entrepreneur. I'm assuming that's big expectations from your family, big shoes to fill. Apart from being an executive director on the SCA group of companies, you are doing some fascinating work. And I know that because we've been dear friends for a long time. You're working with people in Meghalaya, you're working with people in Nagaland, you're working with the youth in Kashmir, you have been an advocate on the Young India initiative of CII. I don't know how many hours there are in your day, but I'd love to hear your journey. How do you make the time for all of this? And please tell us a little bit more about yourself.
I think, Amita, when I was about 9, my father, being the 3rd generation businessman, wanted to, look at his daughter as someone who would, for the first time, succeed in a very male-dominated industry. Our business is into logistics and shipping. You don't see women otherwise. And he asked me, what will you be in the next 25 years? What's your game plan? I mean, you're a 9-year-old kid. It was the first day of my summer holidays. And he said, what will you be in the next 25 years in your life? And I was like, duh. I don't know. He said, okay, no food, no water, go into that room, no sleep, nothing till you figure this out. And every time I came back with him with an idea saying, oh, I want to be an astronaut. Right? So first time around, I went into that room and I came out in 5 minutes and said, astronaut, kuch bhi bol do, kya farak padta hai? So he said, okay, astronaut. And he flew down with me to Bangalore. He had friends at ISRO, took me to meet them. Neil Armstrong came to India and he took me to meet him. And in that meeting, I asked Neil Armstrong, did you always know that you were going to be an astronaut? Like maybe when you were my age, did you know? And he said, sometimes your entire life is a preparation for that one step you take that can become a giant leap for mankind. So never underestimate the journey. And I think in a way it gave me a very different perspective as very early growing up. And the second big experience that happened in life was, as I said, we are in business of logistics, and we were at Jebel Ali Free Zone, and I think in 91, 92, those days when Dubai was still, being pumped up as a city. And we were trying to buy or lease a plot of land for one of our operations, and my father was. I was accompanying him. A lot of my holidays, a lot of my weekends I've spent at warehouses and ports and airports. That's all I've seen and done in my life. And there was this crown prince who's now the king, and Maktoum, and everybody was telling him, Your Highness, Your Highness. It was really scorching May, hot month. So, I kind of went and asked him, I said, you are a king, you're a prince, you're clearly royalty. What are you doing here? Can't you make others do this? And he looked at me and he said, this project, Jebel Ali Free Zone, will eventually build my nation, which is Dubai. And the thing with nation building is that you cannot outsource it. You can outsource everything but nation building. And I think both these experiences for me have become a transformational sort of pieces that I carry in my heart. So when I look at, when I entered the business, and I came back from the US, and when I entered the business and encountered for the first time situations of, aap to bahut choti hain, you are my daughter's age, how can I work for you? And all those issues. I think I took it all in the stride of saying that these are all steps that are going to lead to a giant leap someday. And I continue in that belief today. So I'll end there.
Great. Thank you, BHAIRAVI. SAIREE, moving on. Hydric and struggles, advertising, marketing, journalist, research and consulting, flexi moms, and now Sheroes. Is this it? Or are there more to come? Very keen to hear your journey.
Actually, my real journey and my schooling, so I went to JNU, I did my, ours was a generation where everybody had to be a doctor or engineer, or at least be an engineer before you figure out anything else in your life. But I happened to do my first startup when I was 21. And it was a very chance meeting with someone I had no clue, with an industry I had no clue. It was, meeting a mariner, somebody who had sailed all his life, and he had an idea, and he was like, I'm looking for people who can do this. So it was a simple act of putting my hand up and saying, I'm in, whatever you want to build, I'm in. As the first person on that startup team, I had no idea about technology. We built a technology product. I had no idea about shipping as an industry, about the marine, life. But we built what became world's first newspaper for mariners. And I got to sort of learn everything I know, I think, from, for the rest of my life. So this Sheroes is my fourth startup, and two of the previous startups have been technology startups. I'm not a trained engineer. I'm not somebody who comes from the tech space. But by virtue of having got my hands dirty early on, and giving up the fear of the unknown, So, and I think that still continues to drive me. And today when we are at the stage of building Sheroes up, so we want to be the world's largest community for women that's built around their growth and aspirations. Today we have about 1.2 million members in India. In about 5 years, we want to impact 100 million women. And that's what drives us, that, we're going to set out audacious goals and we just chase it. As for me, I grew up in small town India. I remember, my dad's side from the families from Punjab. And I remember my grandmom saying that if you're a girl and they haven't killed you while you were just born, you should consider yourself lucky. So somewhere I think, I always feel I could have been a statistic, but, what have I got to lose? So might as well, make the most of the opportunity you have.
Wow, what a story, SAIREE. Thank you. GUNJAN, 19 years at Amarchand, Mangaldas. I know you started there when you were 5. You're helping corporates finding solutions and resolving their problems. I was reading about you, GUNJAN, and it says you're a strong believer in karma. I'd love to hear more and what that means for you. And you also say that passion pays. I think there was a big article about you which says passion pays, and I was reading that. Very interesting. Please share your journey with us, Gunjan.
Sure. Thanks, Amitabh. So, very simply put, I was born and raised in Kolkata. I had a fairly traditional upbringing, although my parents always encouraged me to make something of my life. After I finished school in Kolkata, I went to National Law School in Bangalore. Then I went to do my master's degree in Oxford, and then I came back to Delhi. And I joined the firm where I currently work as a junior associate. And as Amitav has pointed out, in all of these years, I worked up the corporate ladder. And today, I'm a partner in the organization, and I'm also part of the management board. All of this seems quite simple, straightforward, seamless, but it was actually quite far from that, every step of the way. When I first, at age 17, when I announced to my family that I wanted to move from Kolkata to Bangalore to study law, although my parents were quite supportive and quite amused by the idea at that time, my grandmother, who was a very powerful person in our family and very unlike your grandmother, she wondered why I need to go to college in the first place and why law. And even if, they all agreed to humor me in my pursuit of law, why try to go to the best law school in the country? I mean, why not go to some law college in Kolkata? There are plenty there. I mean, what was the need to move out of the home? So nobody in my family had moved out of home to study. It was completely unprecedented. And my grandparents and the larger family didn't understand it. Anyway, I wasn't, I wasn't someone who would give up without a fight. So I did go to Bangalore, and I did go to National Law School. So that was the first hurdle. And in the first term that I was there, my grandmother forced one of my uncles to call the director of the institute to check on me and to find out, like, what's the big deal, right? Why can't she just come back home? And aren't there colleges here in Kolkata which are good enough? And to his credit, the director basically said, she's doing fantastically well, I'm not sending her, now she's, bonded to me and the university for the next 5 years. So there I was for the next 5 years of my life. And then a similar struggle when I decided to go to Oxford to get my master's, similar questions, similar arguments and battles at home. But the biggest hurdle was when I decided to move to Delhi to work. Now, they could digest the fact that I wanted to study, right? Education is great, but like to work? I mean, it was absolutely unheard of in my family that I would move from Kolkata to Delhi, live by myself, and work and pursue a career. And my grandmother said, what has happened to this girl? We need to get her head checked. We have enough money in our family to support her and pay for her, and soon enough we'll find her a husband who will then support her and pay for her. Why does she have to, go and work? Anyway, so again, I wasn't going to take that sitting down, and here I am, 20 years later.
Brilliant. Thanks, Gunjan. Meera, I'm going to come back to you. Some of your clients, I know that's not the right word, include gang members from Dawood Ibrahim and Abu Salim and Arun Gauli. I mean, that is some job, right? If you're dealing with people like that. You've put these people behind bars. You've had a film made inspired on your life. What is your inspiration? How do you, just saying these names is giving me goosebumps. It's giving me chills down my spine. I have 2 young kids. Principal of my kids is sitting here. Hi, Pooja, ma'am. And I get chills down my spine just thinking about this. How, A, do you stay inspired? More importantly, how do you stay fearless?
Amitabh, as you have said, my father is from Border Security Force, and earlier he was in Punjab Police. So I don't know, maybe girls from Punjab or police officers' daughters, they are just fearless. I mean, I don't do anything, but I don't feel scared at all. And dealing with the gangsters came later in my life. Earlier I used to deal as a young officer only with petty criminals. So it's not that you suddenly deal with gangsters. So you graduate from a local police to these gangsters. And by the time I had, there are some police officers also here, I had seen enough of them and I had read them. They're ultimately human beings. And they have their own, many movies have also shown, they have their own conduct which they consider as ethical. And mind you, it's true that they have very high respect for honest officers. Wow. So they have their own ethics. I would like to share a small incident which will show you how they work. Without naming a very big gangsters, I mean like, he's really big. So he was totally drunk and he was under our observation at night. And what he was telling his wife was, in Marathi, he was saying in Marathi that I have told you so many times, why don't you listen to me? I have told you so many times. We have 3, so he has 3 daughters. We have 3. At least ekala tari IPS kara na. At least send one to IPS. So this is how they, you know, there are people gone astray. They can be very harmful, very dangerous. Sometimes you really wonder why they are here in front of you. So I think working for a good cause and working for something which is not for your personal gain, it gives you some internal energy. So I don't do anything for motivating myself, but if I feel that injustice is being done, it comes from within. You want to do something. And police gives you an opportunity to do that something. You can define that and then you can work on it. So I have not done it consciously. If I'm fearless, I think it's in my genes. If I've been able to face these very dangerous gangsters, it's because of my training, my experience, and my inner feeling that I'm working for a cause, for the peace in the society. And that really drives you. Thank you.
I have so many follow-up questions, Meera, but unfortunately, since we've got 4 panelists, and Harshit, this is just a point. Maybe next time we should do a one-on-one, because there's just so much to ask for. So, BHAIRAVI, 18,181 kilometers in 51 days across 28 states and 102 locations. That's what you did last year or 2 years ago in India. I mean, nothing beats that. You basically traversed the country on 4 wheels. You went to villages, you went to towns, you met people, you lived with them, you ate with them, you stayed with them. What a wonderful experience. The question I have for you, can you give me some instances of people, women specifically, youngsters, who we'll never hear of, who are being bold for change?
It was a trip, Amitabh, which came out of a discussion with a friend, because I was exasperated that I wasn't finding research companies to go down to hinterland India and ask the questions about, you know, what kind of livelihood choices people made and how did it impacted their political choices. And therefore, this was done during the election time in 2014, during the Lok Sabha election time. And we ended up driving up from Chennai into hinterland. And one of the first few places that we went to actually was Tirupati. In Tirupati, in the center of the market, is a lady by the name Reddy Amma. And Reddy Amma must be 68, 69. This lady runs a Naidu food kitchen and is legendary in terms of, her food and what she serves. She doesn't employ women, she only employs men. She told me that it was because her mother told her that, women belonged in the kitchen. So she decided to make the men belong in the kitchen and herself sit at the, And so she sits in this middle of downtown Tirupati with this really gangster-like look, like, this is my place. And even if the police would come, like we parked our vehicle and police came and said, you can't park here. She sort of yelled at them in Telugu and said, what are you talking about? They're my customers, I mean, she had that kind of way. This woman serves the most amazing cuisine you can eat at 10 rupees a thali. She's not changed that in the last 20 years of what she's been serving. And all the food that gets left over, she gives it to all the orphanages which are in that neighborhood. To me, when I asked her, I said, don't you know you're a senior citizen, you can get benefit, you're a widow, you can get this. So, and very interesting way she looked at me and said, I don't want any of that. I can stand on my feet and I can do this on my own. Why should I be standing in line for any kind of help from anybody? Across the country, I met women who represented that feeling. Whether they were working in the farm and they said, if you give us a little bit of like a bus availability, we could travel 60, 70 kilometers and go and work in a factory also because, with the farming work, we can also do this because farm labor is kind of seasonal. There was a woman I met whose husband was an alcoholic, but in Imphal, in Manipur. And Imphal, I don't know if many of you know, most places in Northeast, but especially Manipur has this women's market where only women can sell. And so this was one of those markets, and she was a cash like vendor, which means that she gave change. So if you went with like $50, she would give you like, change. So she was the cashier for the market as such. And in a way, I mean, she was a teacher. She's by education a B.Ed. But her husband, because of alcoholism, had to stop working and then eventually died, and she had 3 children. So she decided that in the morning she would teach and afternoon she would sit in this market. And it was just amazing to see how she had decided to take this further. There were women, for example, whom I met in small villages in Naxalbari area and others which are occupied by Santhal tribes. These are tribal women who work on self-help group to provide health security for their families. I met women, pujarans, so Mandi in Himachal has almost 2,000 temples. Many of those temples we don't know, but are actually, the chief priest is a pujaran and not a pujari. And the tradition is taken forward by the pujarans. Across the country, I saw young women in Hampi who were driving electronic golf carts because, those are the ruins, and they were local girls who were trained and were now acting. And I asked one of them, I said, don't you think you get pressure of marriage? She said, I'm divorced. I said, why are you divorced? And she was like, you know what? He was asking me too many questions about why I'm working and all of that. So I told him, I said, look, if you cannot understand that I need to work and not beg to you for my money, then I don't need to be married to you. And she said, I divorced him. I mean, the stuff that you think, even urban middle-class girls sometimes will think 50 times before taking decisions. I saw these women in hinterland India really, take it up. And if you look around the country, I think women, we haven't recognized the economic contribution of women in India because agriculture labor, small shops, kirana shops, milk dairies, all of this are run by women. But our formal accounting especially, because all of these sectors come under unorganized sector, do not look at women contributing. So women's contribution to the nation's GDP has gone ignored. And if you drive around the country, you literally feel, and not that I want to discount men, but women run the show in this country. If you just look around, I mean, they're running the show. And if they kind of went on strike, good luck to this country. I mean, that's something that we need to really get into formal accounting in the country, give women their due. And, one of the funniest incidences was that I was the only woman with 3 men in the car, which of course my parents kind of realized after I had set off saying, my father asked my mother saying, kiske saath gayi hai? My mother was like, one person I know, the other 2 people I don't know. And they were like, but didn't you ask her? And he was like, no, I didn't ask her. And suddenly they had this moment of fear, like saying, ye ladki in a car with 3 men. And by the way, all 3 of them were South Indian. So beyond Orissa, like we were driving from Chennai, they were useless in conversations of talking to anybody whatsoever. And it was election time, so we got stopped a lot by police, cops, Rashtriya Rifles, all the time. And we were driving in areas like that. And one of the things that happened was on the drive is that we were driving from Mizoram to Tripura through the hills. And we got lost. We really got lost. And we were trying to ask questions, and we were at a border security force, and you mentioned BSF, and they kind of looked at me and said, he was Maharashtrian, and so I asked him in Marathi saying, okay, do you think we are headed the right way? And he told me, Mulgi, kutta firstly, like where have you gotten stuck, right? I mean, are you crazy? You are now going to get into a forest where kidnappings happen, and you have to clear the forest before the sunset, and I will give you 2 local boys who'll do you. We went into the forest, and luck would have it, we were ambushed. I had 15 guns pointing to my head, and you had to quickly think on your feet on what you were going to do. This is a forest area called Damparang Pui, which is between Tripura and Mizoram. And we had a cameraman in the team, so I kind of told him, quickly get the camera. And I told the guy, I said, I have traveled so far to meet you. I didn't know his name, but I need to interview you. Oh, wow. And I'm going to make you very, very famous. Right. And to me, it was so amazing that there were all these men, 3 in my car, 15 around me, and I was the only woman. And I kept laughing for the rest of the day with a little bit of a sense of pride, saying, it took a woman to get out of the situation.
Smart. Thanks, Bhairavi. SAIREE, just continuing on what Bhairavi said regarding women's contribution to the GDP, you are very close to that because you're connecting women to jobs, right? I am particularly keen, I think all of you have mentioned that you've broken social taboos, you are where you are today despite the odds. Those odds still stack up against most women in this country. They're not supposed to get jobs, they're not really supposed to even be educated, but clearly they run the show, right? What is it that you are seeing develop, and what, if it's not, what are you doing specifically to help prevent that talent pipeline from just eroding? It can't be male domination forever. It's got to change. Yeah. What are you seeing at Sheroes? What have you seen personally? Yeah.
So fundamentally, I think, so we're not connecting women to jobs. I think that just narrows us down completely, So we really feel what we're doing is connecting them to aspirations, and going back to what Bhairavi said, women have got the short end of the stick. Their work doesn't get accounted. Everything related to women becomes so uncool and sexy. Basically, it's all hidden under the carpet, right? Or it's not accounted for, or it just doesn't stack up. And I also find that, while there is this whole conversation of talent pipeline, I just feel, how can we call something a pipeline when it's all around, it's all pervasive, right? Let me put some stats on the table. Because we inherited the British system of education, as a country, we produce the maximum number of women graduates in the world, which means India has more educated, employable, ready women to work than any other country in the world. And we have the lowest workforce numbers, the women's participation numbers. When you put these 2 things together, it's a very stark sort of story. And let's face it, women got left behind in the whole industrialization story, in the entrepreneurship story. Wall Street left them behind, which is the primary engine of wealth generation globally, which means we have to find new ways to hack this. If we kept begging for us to get an entry into the talent pipeline, we're never getting there. And the big pointer of the fact is that leadership numbers for women in India and US are the same. So I feel that this is one place we have to draw our own story. India has a unique opportunity to marry what I call future of work and women at work. So clearly we all know automation is going to take over our lives. Robots are going to run the show, which also means the newer opportunities of employment are in micro-entrepreneurship. they are in remote work, they are in virtual work, they are in technology-based work, they are in platforms, they are in what I call the gig economy. They are also in reviving the local economies, which are primarily run by women. And I think that is the opportunity. And that's the opportunity we are hacking. And how are we hacking it? By creating a technology-backed ecosystem. You know, so when somebody says, what does your company do? We say we are Tesla of gender. We are taking a problem that's been around for a while, but we are adding a deep tech stack, one, that will make it scalable. Two, it will make it cool. You know, I just hate the fact that a lot of work done around women has been done because it comes from the victim mode. You know, a lot of these women are not victims. What they need is something that they can adopt as part of their lives, you know, something that's as cool or as pervasive as, let's say, a Facebook or a mobile phone, or, you know, going in a car or a bus. And it needs to be as simple as that. And essentially, that's what we are doing. As an organization, on the front face, we're a consumer internet company. Women from all over the country reach us from, you know, each of these locations that you just mentioned. And what they get is, one, a circle of support. You know, we've all heard of the Big Boys Network. So we're breaking that down into the Women's Network. Essentially, it's a circle of support to begin with. And then we're increasing your access to resources. So I'm very proud of the fact that a Sheroes user has access to more jobs than the next platform, be it a LinkedIn or a Naukri, because what we've done is we've aggregated it. We've opened the ecosystem, you know, so we work with about 300 partners to power things like this. We do the same in skilling, you know, so whether it is working with, you know, large companies like Coursera or the local service provider, they're all in one place. So we're curating this conversation. We work with industry to bring that piece together, where if I'm a woman in Agartala who wants to understand how to set up a beauty parlor or how to become a coder, I can find it right here. And the fourth thing we do is we stack this up with a lot of support. So we run a career helpline, which is one of its own experiment in the world. And the way it is scaling up. So our next, you know, so today we are an English-speaking platform, talk to urban educated, graduate set. But our next journey is to go to the vernacular set, to say, hey, let's talk to somebody who doesn't speak English, can't log in from a smartphone, but maybe she has Nokia 3300. Maybe she can send an SMS. So that's our approach to solving what has been traditionally a women in workforce issue. But the way we want to do this is, it's not going to only happen by us talking about it or, you know, organizations evangelizing it. Organizations are very significant in this, but ultimately the real power is in the hands of the user, you know, and it gives them the choice to go to choose what works. You know, a lot of us have come from the place of prescription, right? Women should be in leadership, women should be managers, which is great. But at the same time, why don't we allow all these women to do what works for them at their stage in life?
Great. Very cool, SAIREE. Thanks. Gunjan, you, somewhere I read that while you're right now a corporate lawyer and supporting corporates with their issues, you see life evolving into one where you're a policy or a lawmaker, that you're influencing legislation. I'd be very keen to hear from you. What policy change would you like to see?
I don't know where to begin. I think there's a lot. I mean, I'll talk about what I want to do in respect of the subject that we're talking about today. I'd like a lot to change in respect of public policy and legislative action, as well as implementation of the policy and legislation as far as women and women's rights are concerned. A lot, as all of you know, the Constitution of our country provides for equality before the law, irrespective of caste, color, creed, gender. But the polarized world that we live in, we see all kinds of discriminations, including on the basis of gender. And for me, gender is a very sensitive issue, and I'd like to focus on public policy and legislative action to improve the status of women in this country. I mean, recent examples are the amendments to the Maternity Benefit Act, and now we have a Sexual Harassment Act. But what has the government really done with regards to the implementation. It's good to have a statute on the books, right? So the government has put in place a statute. But where is the monitoring of the implementation? Where is the assessment of what impact that statute has had? So I want to do a lot of work in that space. I want to influence policy by taking into account the implementation and the assessment and the impact the policy has had. You know, I'm very, it depresses me to say I work with large corporations. All of them are well aware of the sexual harassment laws of this country, but very few of them have in place the mechanism that the